She was older than me. She was about, look at me, but she was in her late 50s or early 60s, something like that.
So you, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old man in a fight with a woman in her 60s?
Yeah, she was a big woman.
All right. Well, after you hit her in the head with the hammer, why didn't you just leave?
I tried to do that, but she
Maybe.
wouldn't. It was a struggle. It was a struggle, and
Okay, but I
it
would.
escalated. It escalated from there. I was trying that. I didn't not intend for that to go as far as
Okay.
it did.
So I've been reading the comments and I see that you've been asking for some classic Miss Jackson, Mr. Roche hearings. So we are going to bring you one that we haven't brought to you yet. And that took place in 2022. It's a commutation hearing. And as you can see, it's a bit of a wild one. I'll unpack it with some interesting details at the end.
All right. So you are George Moore III. Your DOC number is 98494. You're seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in August 1982 in Madison Parish to life for a first-degree murder conviction. Mr. Moore, is that information correct?
Yes, ma'am. It is.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Jackson. Good afternoon, Mr. Moore. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm still alive.
That's a blessing. That's a blessing. Well, your case has been assigned to me, so I'm going to start asking the questions, all right?
Yes, ma'am.
How old are you, Mr. Moore?
I'm 66 now.
And how long have you served on this charge?
This will be going on 41 years. This year will be 41 years.
And that in December.
Yes, ma'am. 13.
And so how old were you when you committed this crime?
I was 25.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about who you were back then. Had you graduated from high school?
No, ma'am, I wasn't.
Why didn't you graduate from high school?
Well, I was in and out of trouble mostly. And
How old were you when you first started getting into trouble?
I was 14.
What kind of trouble did you start off with?
Well, it was basically knocking glasses out of vehicles and stuff like that. I was running with the wrong crowd is what I was doing. And since they were doing it, I started doing it. So
Were you committing burglaries? Were you breaking the windows out of the vehicles to steal something?
no, ma'am. We just were breaking the windows just to break them. And it didn't make any sense. So the chief of police at that time, he got me and had me in the car and he was trying to talk to me. He told me, he said, now, you know, you're going to wind up going to reform school for doing stuff like this. Now, I'm going to bring you to your mother. So he brought me to my mother. And she tried to talk to me, said, you could just in and out of trouble, in and out of trouble. I'm going to have to send you to Florida where her brother lived. And that's why I ultimately wound up going.
Okay, how old were you when you went to Florida?
I was 15 then.
How long did you stay? Where in Florida?
Fort Pierce, Florida.
And how long did you stay in Florida?
I stayed in Florida till I was 19.
All right, so from 15 to 19, what were you doing? Were you working or were you in school? Were you still getting in trouble? What was going on between
Oh
ages?
no, I wasn't getting in no trouble. They was fruit picking. You picking fruit in the fruit groves and stuff. That's my uncle. He worked as a subcontractor, and that's what he had me doing.
Okay, but you didn't go back. You didn't get back in school.
No, ma'am. What no school. It was work every day. He told me he was gonna make a man out of me. That's what he said.
Okay, so what brought you back to Louisiana?
Something that happened, and well, she wasn't his wife. She was like his live-in girlfriend. She tried to do something to me that I wasn't comfortable with. And when I tried to talk to him about it, he laughed about it. But I called my mother and told her what was going on. And she told me that, well, what you want to do? You want to come home or you want to go where your brother? My brother lived in Fort Worth, Texas. And I told her, I said, well, I go to Fort Worth because I can't stay here with this. You know, I had never had any experience with girls, and what she was trying to do, I wasn't comfortable with that.
Okay. And so you came back to Louisiana. How did you end up getting back into trouble?
I went to Texas. I was in Texas. And when I came back to Louisiana for Christmas holiday, I got into a fight at this place with a guy. That's when I first did time. I did the East Cal Parish Prison. I did a 3-year sentence for battery. I got into a fight, and it started from there. And I could have got out on parole then, but I turned the parole down because my mom told me, "Say you're going down the same road you was in." So I turned the parole down.
Okay, but it was an aggravated battery, which means there was some kind of weapon used. What kind of weapon did you use when you committed the battery? It got you that time.
The guy that I was fighting with, he had a stick. I took the stick from him and hit him with the stick. And that's how I got the aggravated battery charge.
You ended up serving a 3-year sentence for that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, how long after you got out of prison did you commit the crime that you're serving time for now?
About almost 3 years. Almost.
Well, how old were you when you committed this crime?
The one I'm on now?
Yes. Yes.
The one that I'm in here doing the time for now?
Yes.
I was 25. I was 25.
So let's talk about that day. What happened? How did you end up killing this woman?
I had been on drugs, what we call freebasing. At that time, that just had
Let's stop right there. When did you start using drugs?
it was about almost 3 years had went by, and I ran into an old guy that I did time with. We got hooked up together, and that's when the drug use started. Because at first I didn't do drugs, and started out smoking weed, and from there went to putting coke in the weed, and it got to the point I just couldn't do without it.
So what happened on the day that this crime occurred?
That day there, my girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, she sent me to go and get us some ice cream. So it was pouring down raining. Went out to get the ice cream. And when I got there, the victim, she was talking to another individual, but they was in a conversation about a pregnant woman. I was under the impression that they was talking about my girlfriend. But as it turned out, I later found out that wasn't the case at all. And all of this started because I was thinking that this was being said about my girlfriend. And by me being on that stuff at the time, I wasn't thinking correctly. And I always had a problem.
So what did you do?
Me and her got into an argument in there, and it just escalated from there. And
tell us what you did.
Me and her got in an argument. She hit me, and when she hit me, I said some things that I shouldn't have said. She said, and we got into a fight, and my temper took over, and I just lost control.
Okay, but didn't you hit her in the head with a hammer?
It wasn't a hammer. She had something looked like a pipe was over behind the counter where she was at. And that's what that was. It wasn't a hammer.
Well, they say it was a ball peen hammer. You know what about ball peen hammer is?
No.
It doesn't have a ball on it. It has a ball.
No, this
Where the
was
paw was.
like a pipe. That's what it was. It was a pipe. Now,
Mhm.
I think they probably got that confused with when I was at the East Carroll Parish Prison. They had us working in the slaughter room, and we used to use a ball peen hammer to slaughter the animals that we used to process there. That's the only time a ball peen hammer had ever been used.
And so you hit her with the pipe?
Yes, ma'am. She hit me, and I hit her, and it escalated.
Stop talking. How old a person was this lady?
I have no idea.
If you had to guess.
Oh, she was older than me. She was about, look at me, but she was in her late 50s or early 60s, something like that.
So you, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old man in a fight with a woman in her 60s?
Yeah, she was a big woman.
All right. Well, after you hit her in the head with the hammer, why didn't you just leave?
I tried to do that, but
Wait a
she
minute.
wouldn't. It was a struggle. It was a struggle, and
Okay, but
it
I would-
escalated. It escalated from there. I was trying that. I didn't not intend for that to go as far as it did.
Are you telling me that a 25-year-old man could not get out of the grip of a woman in her 60s?
If you seen the size of her, you would understand. We was in a struggle. I could.
And when did you? Okay, stop talking. But you ended up shooting her in the head, didn't you?
With her own pistol, the pistol I took from her to keep her from shooting me.
Right. So all the weapons involved, they came from her, and she pulled them on you. Is that correct?
She went to put them. I took it from her. I took it from her. That's how I was trying to leave. She wouldn't. When she went for that, that's when it escalated. I just lost
Well, then why did you go in the register and take money?
money.
Hmm.
That was.
Oh, register and took money?
I don't know anything about any money.
Okay, all right. I saw something about that in a police report, but that's okay. Let me ask you this. You've been in prison a long time. It's more, almost 41 years. Tell us some of the things that you've done to improve yourself over the last 41 years.
When I first got an opportunity to get in school, they took us out of the school when I first got here because they said at that time, if you had a life sentence, you wasn't eligible. So I tried to get in trade school. They also said you wasn't eligible. So when the guys would come back and forth from the school, I would get them to try to tutor me because I wanted to do something with my life. And I couldn't do it because of the fact everything had me shut off because I had a life sentence. And it wasn't until administrations changed that changed. And as soon as it did, I got enrolled in these self-help programs.
Tell me what programs you were able to take.
I was able to take 100 hours. I was able to take substance abuse, anger management, thinking for a change, and the one that I'm in right now, victims awareness.
Okay. So did you do living in balance?
That's added in with the 100 hours living in balance.
Tell me about living in balance.
That's for people that pretty much trying to get away from that type of lifestyle for using the alcohol and the drugs and whatever. And you get an opportunity to try to enroll, and it pretty much led me to these programs that I got enrolled in.
Well, what did you get
I
out
got
of?
started.
What did you get out of living in balance?
I seen the life that I was living, and it was going nowhere. I didn't have no purpose. I didn't have no direction, and this was pointing me in the right direction.
Once you get, are you sure you're not talking about thinking for change?
All of this put me toward every other program that I took. It directed me to that because I liked each one that I took. I liked it. It showed me where I was and where I didn't want to be. So that's what I was doing.
Well, you told us about your serious drug addiction. What have you learned in prison that would help you with your drug addiction?
Mr. Jackson, when I first came here, I was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day because I was stressed out because I was thinking about all what I had done and everything like that. And when I got enrolled in these, all that I could think about was trying to undo what I had done. And I didn't have a clue as to how to do it. And when I got started with these programs, then I seen that I was able to make a difference with what I was doing. So dealing with these programs, I was able to see that I lost my control by being under the influence of these drugs and stuff. And I lost that control, and that's what really caused it. I wasn't in control.
How, if you were to be successful, what have you learned that would help you not go back to using drugs? You know, it's different inside. I know there are drugs in the institution,
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
but not the same thing as being a free person in a world full of drugs and any other thing you want. So my question is, what have you learned that would help you not to fall back into those old habits?
Well, one thing that I learned, not to hang out in the same circles like what I was hanging out with, because if you introduce yourself to people that's doing these type of things, then you're going to wind up doing the same thing. So I disassociated myself with those types of circles. I went, believe it or not, I mean, they say you ain't supposed to talk about changing life through faith, but that's exactly what I did. In 2013, God became baptized and became a Jehovah's Witness. And since then, I pretty much been in circles with my Christian brothers. And they pretty much keep me straight. I mean, and through that, I keep myself straight.
So what kind of job skills do you have, Mr. Bradley?
Well,
What kind of job skills?
right now, I'm working at the water treatment plant. I keep the yard, I keep the building straight, stuff like that. But ever since I had the aneurysm, basically I can't do too much. But the things that I can do, I do them the best that I can because, I mean, people come in and out of prison, and right there where I work at, I keep that yard there immaculate so that everybody sees that ain't nothing just being run over. That's what I do. I try to do the best that I can.
Let me ask you, tell me about the aneurysm. When did you have the aneurysm?
I had an aneurysm in 2019.
And
And
how did the aneurysm affect you? How has it affected you?
well, on this side, I'm right-handed, but I can't write with my right hand no more because I don't have that much use of my right hand. So I had to teach myself how to write with my left. And I try to do everything now with the left hand. And that's basically what I do.
What about your memory and your thinking? Did the aneurysm affect that?
Well, I had to, it's like I was like in a fog, but through my Christian brothers, they helped me. And it's starting to come back bits and pieces. Like I got a schedule. I go to class on Tuesdays. I go to book study and watchtower study on Wednesday. And on Saturday, we go in field circle. And I base my rest of my week for the work week, and that's how I do week to week.
So if you were successful, I know, right, what's your plan? Where would you go? Where would you live? How would you support yourself?
I got in contact with the parole project, and I've been talking with them, and they told me that they got different resources there that can help me to get myself together, or as how to get job requirements and stuff like that. And basically, I have a place to stay because one of my family members, my sister, the one that's next to me, I'll be living with her. She don't have any children, and she and I basically be there by ourselves.
What kind of work do you think you can do?
That's what I'm trying to get with the parole project to see what they can get me with, what I'm able to do.
Can I speak to the warden?
Yes, ma'am.
Warden, what can you tell us about Mr. Moore?
I don't have anything else to add to Mr. Moore. Everything that you have is the same thing I have. He haven't had any reports since 2012, and he completed substance abuse anger management and T4C in 100 hours. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for speaking with me, and Mr. Johnson, that's all I have.
Mr. Moore, we'll hear from the folks who want to speak on your behalf. If we could hear from the parole project, Mr. Myers.
Yes, good afternoon. Kerry Myers, Louisiana Parole Project. Mr. Moore is 66 years old and has served about right at 40 years in prison. One of the things that Parole Project can assist him while he's with us is connecting him to the services that he is eligible for. Medicaid, he would be eligible based on his age and condition for SSI, supplemental income. So he would have an income even if he cannot find full-time employment, which is more than likely, going to be difficult. He does have a long-term residence with his sister in Tallulah, and we will work with Mr. Moore as long as we need to before he goes to that, till we determine that he's actually ready to make that next step transition. He has done. In 1999, he earned his GED while he was there. That was one of the first things he did when he talked about being able to get in school. He was ready to make changes in his life. When he was able to get in programs, he did that. He's maintained a good work record, even with his physical issues right now. And he hasn't had no disciplinary write-ups in 2012 and no disciplinary write-ups for violence in his entire incarceration. He took responsibility for his crime. He pleaded guilty. And at 66 years old, Mr. Moore is no threat to public safety. And we believe that he would be an excellent candidate for us. We'd make sure he has all the support he needs. And we just ask this board to grant his recommendation today.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Turner? Oh, your microphone's on mute. You're still on mute.
Now can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Moore is our first cousin of mine. I currently am the assistant pastor a couple of houses down from where that incident took place. And I've been there, assistant pastor there for 30 years. I've also worked law enforcement, which I retired from in 2017. And I'm also pastor at a church up in East Carroll Parish. And I will do everything in my power to keep him with me and to be right with him. You know, we've had a fairly close relationship, but I was working in Baton Rouge Police Department when that happened. I've never been arrested before, never been to jail for anything. And like I say, I worked law enforcement all my life. Worked with even I think one guy that was with you guys, Ralph Stassi, at one point in time. But like I say, you know, he's been there 40 years. And I just hope and pray that this is a chance to him to rectify and get his life back on track. And I would just thank you guys for whatever y'all consideration is.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
ma'am.
Let me just clarify something that Mr. Myers indicated, a GED, and I think he said 1999. Mr. Moore, is that correct? When did you get your GED? We showing in the record there is none. On the
You
institution.
don't have a GED. You don't have a GED.
He does not.
No, ma'am. He just did the TABE test. That's it.
I apologize. I misspoke.
Okay, we just wanted to confirm. Thank you. All right, I believe it's panel today for the board, rather. Mrs. Jackson. All right.
All right, Mr. Moore, I appreciate you talking to me. You've only had 20 write-ups in 40 years, the last one being in 2012. You have taken some programs, you have a good institutional record. You do have some health issues that are probably going to make things more difficult for you as time goes on. But you do have the support of the parole project and the letters of support from two of your sisters, and a lot of people signed petitions on your behalf. And so in light of the amount of time that you served and the positive remarks that we've heard today, my vote would be recommend to the government that your sentence be commuted to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rush.
Mr. Moore,
Yes, sir.
I've sat down and I've listened, and I've listened to the story about this 6-year-old woman attacked you and you were defending yourself. And I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a second. You know exactly where Penny Ball's hammer is. You shot the victim twice in the head, and she grabbed your leg, and you did jump over the counter, and you took the money out the cash register. And you just nonchalantly, without a care in the world, sat down and told that story. How big she was. But you've been incarcerated for 40 years. You have medical issues. You have the support of your family. You have the support of the Louisiana Parole Project. And I think your medical issues are going to get worse as time goes on. So I'm going to agree with Ms. Jackson, but I had to tell you, not for 1 second did I believe that concocted story about you were defending yourself when you went into a grocery store. You deliberately hit the lady and shot her twice and then you rob the store. You would not have been convicted if you didn't do that. But I will agree with Ms. Jackson based upon your medical condition and based upon the length of incarceration. Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Mr. Mirabella?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Moore, I agree with my colleagues. You've done a lot while you've been in prison. Your age, the length of time you've been in prison, and the medical issues that you have, I vote would likewise to commute to 99 with immediate. Good luck to you.
Mr. Freeman?
I also agree with my colleagues and vote to commute your sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility.
Great, thank you. Mr. Moore, I do agree based on your age and length of incarceration. I bet today would be to commute your sentence to 99 years with immediate parole eligibility. So we'll make that recommendation on behalf. You got
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, bro.
Okay, so the governor did sign the commutation, which is pretty much what we expected. It's very rare when they don't. And he is in the docket to have a parole hearing sometime in Q4. So in the next 5 months for sure. Probably, if I had to guess, in the next 3 to 5 months, we're going to see him show up, and I'll play it for you when he does show up. And thanks to Richard, it makes it so easy to see all this information. It's all in the spreadsheet. We know when the parole hearings are coming, and I'll play it for you. And in the past, a parole hearing after commutation is typically a shoo-in. I would say probably more than 95% of the time. And the reason is that the governor handpicks the pardon and parole board. It's a handpicked selection. So if the parole board, the pardon board, the commutation board says, hey, we're making a recommendation, governor, to commute a sentence so we can parole him. And then the governor says, well, thank you for making the recommendation. I'm going to sign it here. And then a year later or 6 months later, they come up for parole. And then the parole board says, oh, I know we made the recommendation, but now we change our mind. So that doesn't happen, right? Now, it could happen that maybe there's something political in the background we don't know, where the governor says, whoa, I got a lot of pushback. Maybe, that could be a scenario. Or maybe the person gets a write-up or bad write-up in the interim. Or, like what's happening in this case, we have a new governor. And the new governor isn't going to care that the old governor's handpicked board recommended commutation, that the old governor signed the commutation hearing. So that's why there is a twist to this upcoming parole hearing. We have already seen one where the result was not what we expected. And we're going to see a lot showing up in this docket because the governor at the end of his term was handing out pardons and commutations left and right. It was part of his agenda. He was just, it was like an assembly line. And now with the new parole board showing up, these things might not be shoo-ins. And with the performance that we saw today from this guy, I don't know if the new parole board would grant him that grace. Hello, old man. How are you? You look. I think you look the same, right? Still world's best dad, of course. But the reason I'm replaying this hearing again is because we are blasting to the present day. It's February 5th, 2025, and we are going to have this parole hearing now. I'm kind of doing y'all a little bit of a favor. They changed the format. I don't know if you've noticed in the newer hearings where they start with hearing the testimony of the support. It's like 10 minutes of, the regular thing. I'm going to cut off most of it. Maybe I'll keep something in from his son because it's a little relevant. And we'll jump into the hearing, and you're going to have to tell me, do you think they grant? Do you think that he changes his story? What do you think of the process? Let's go.
Please introduce yourself, sir, and give us your DOC number.
Yes, George Moore, number 98494.
Mr. Moore, you're before this panel today as a second-class offender who's currently, you were serving a life sentence that was commuted to 99 with eligibility for parole. You have a parole eligibility date in 2021. You have an adjusted good time date of 2030 and a full term date of 2080. Does that sound correct to you?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Okay. We have several members joining us via Zoom, and we do have your attorney who will speak before our questioning. But before we turn to them, I'd like to ask Warden Benoit if you have some information you would like to share about this offender.
Yes, ma'am. I've known George since the day he got here, I guess. He's had some ups and downs early in his career. He's got 20 DB report. His last one was in 16 for state mattress. That's kind of a minor charge. He's worked at the water treatment plant for a good while now for us. He's a Class A trustee, signed a Camp F. He's in a pretty trusted position where he works out at the water treatment plant, very little supervision. So we trust him to be there.
Okay, thank you for that. We have George Phillips, your son, who would like to speak, and we would give him that opportunity now.
Good morning.
Hi.
First off, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is George Phillips, son of George Moore. I was an unborn child when this happened. I do not know the nature of his crime, nor do I know the victim of it. So growing up, my father was pretty much whatever people told me, which in most cases created more unanswered questions that I hope will be answered today. For me, the hardest part of his incarceration has been the separation, because over the years, I became one of those who suffered the most. Being his child, I was guilty of nothing, but eventually I had to carry the weight that came with the consequences of his actions. Because he could never be there when I needed him the most. A day that I'll never forget is when I was 11 years old. This was the first time my father told me that he might be coming home. So I waited, excuse me. So I waited on the steps for him. My mom, with tears in her eyes, tried several times to convince me otherwise, but was to no avail. Because despite his absence and not really knowing him, I still looked up to my father. He was my hero. So for the last 31 years, that 11-year-old child in me has still been waiting on those steps, still waiting for his father to come home. Tomorrow will make 43 years that I've had to endure life without ever having a day absent of supervision with my father, which has made things very uneasy at times. So no gift would be greater than for my 43rd birthday, the dream of that 11-year-old child to finally have his dream come true, to see my father come home.
So much. Mr. Moore, I apologize. I don't believe that I gave you the opportunity to speak, did I? Could you please provide this board with why we should allow you to be released today and what brought you there?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Board, for allowing me to speak. I've heard all of these wonderful things from people that, I mean, I did a great dishonorable thing to all of them because my actions caused them to feel the brunt of everything that I did. And I did this. I killed Miss Alma Ellaby full of drugs and alcohol. And I always did have a problem with my anger. And this was motivated through things that had happened to me early in my life. And there's no excuse really because life is about choices. And had I had the things that I have access to here, this probably never would have happened. Matter of fact, I'm sure that it never would have. But again, I said, life is about choices. And had I not made the choice that I made, then these two families wouldn't have been destroyed the way that they were. It was a lose-lose on both sides. When I came here, my son was still not born. And when he was born, I was still here. All of the people that were dear to me at that time, my mother, my oldest sister, my father, all of them are deceased now. So everything that was near and dear to me, I've lost because of the decision that I made. And I regret that. And I can't change the things that I did in the past from mindless behavior that I chose to do. But I've done things to try to rectify that because I knew I had a problem. But when I first got here, everything that I was trying to achieve was unavailable to me. And I didn't give up because when the administration changed, they had a lady came to work here and she was God sent because her name was Miss Dorothy White. And Miss Dorothy White told me, she said, all of these opportunities that they have here for us, going to school, going to trade school, she said, you got a life sentence and you're not eligible for any of them. She said, more, I'm gonna tell you this right now. I said, administration change and people change and the mindsets that they have now might not be the same mindsets later on. She said, all you got to do is keep your focus. And I did that. I kept my focus. I didn't refuse to do any jobs, regardless to how hard they were or how belittling they were or how messy they were. Whatever they called me to do, I did because I accepted this as part of my punishment for what I had done. And no matter what they had done to me, it didn't matter because what I had done, you can't overcome that really. And this is what drove me as much as it did. Ultimately, this is what caused me to have the aneurysm because I beat myself up over, I just couldn't get past it, what I had done. And even though your family don't say it right out, they were feeling the weight of this. They had to live with it, and a lot of them still live in the same area. And that's a shadow on them that I can't never erase. And I can't ask them to forgive me because I did this because I made that decision. So I got involved in, when the day did come available to me, I got into it. I didn't just get into it to get no certificate. I got into it because I really needed to change. And I applied myself. And everything that I did, I used it to show that I wasn't that same person.
Thank you very much for those comments. And now I believe Sloan, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Mr. Moore will be the first to tell you that the offense he committed in 1981 is unforgivable. Though he refuses to attempt to justify his actions, what he realizes today is that that horrible moment in 1981 when he allowed drugs and anger to take control was his rock bottom. And he's only gone up from there. He will never forgive himself for allowing it to get to that point, but it was a turning point for Mr. Moore. He took responsibility for his offense when he pleaded guilty to it. He accepted his sentence as a necessary consequence of his actions, and he turned his focus toward rehabilitation, sobriety, and harm reduction. Although Mr. Moore did a horrible thing by taking Miss Ellaby's life, he is a man with a good heart. The opportunities he found in prison allowed him to free himself of the clout of intoxication, of anger, of impulsive thinking. As he says, what brought him here is what made him stop and change. You don't often hear someone say that they're grateful for the opportunity to have gone to prison. But Mr. Moore will tell you that. He feels that prison is what he needed, both as punishment for his offense and to have access to resources that he desperately needed to heal and grow at that time in his life. Mr. Moore experienced severe and repeated trauma as a teen that turned his life upside down. He did not have access to the resources that he needed to heal, and so instead he sought ways to escape the uncontrollable feelings of anger, betrayal, fear, confusion. He turned to drugs and alcohol, resources that were unfortunately available to him. Prison provided Mr. Moore with the resources he needed to begin to overcome his trauma, to become sober, to manage his anger, and to grow into a positive and contributing member of his community. His institutional record and his reputation at Angola reflect his focus and determination toward becoming a better person. In fact, he refuses to stop working toward that goal because even after he nearly died from a subdural hemorrhage caused by an aneurysm, for which he had to have surgery to remove part of his skull, all of which caused brain damage, he refused to stop working. As soon as he was able, he jumped right back into work. And although the prison wanted to put him on light duty, he refused. He wanted to go back to work because he knew that he needed to continue to give back. He does everything that he can manage at the water treatment plant, despite the limitations that were caused by the subdural hemorrhage that he suffered. As Mr. Moore once told me, he has put his whole life into showing that he is sorry for what he did, and he will do whatever is necessary to show that he is not the person he once was. He wants his actions to show his remorse and not just his words. He uses his experience to encourage others to keep the same focus, to inspire growth and mutual respect and inspire change. In 43 years, he has had only 20 write-ups. He's not had a write-up in over 12 years. He's a Class A trustee, and he has been trusted to work on the B-line with free folks in and around their homes. For Mr. Moore, the goals of incarceration have been achieved. It has served its purpose and successfully rehabilitated himself. There's not much more he can do if he continues his incarceration. He fully recognizes the harm he caused and uses that understanding to motivate himself and others to do good, only good, and to avoid harm. He is deeply dedicated to his sobriety and to his faith, and he comes equipped with his toolbox, which he'll tell you about, of methods and techniques that he uses every day to face life's obstacles. He keeps that toolbox close to him, and he'll take it with him if he gets the opportunity to be released. He has an excellent reentry plan involving support from his family, from his sisters, his cousins, his son, and from the Parole Project, who is committed to his success outside of prison. For these reasons, I would ask that the committee grant Mr. Moore's application for parole, and I'm happy to answer questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Certainly believe that everything that could be asked has been already addressed. So I don't have any questions. So the law enforcement community in Tallulah may not be as welcoming to you. Would you have a secondary, if you went to the Parole Project and stayed for a while, where would you go after? Because I'm not sure going back to Tallulah would be a good idea.
Well, the other option is with my son. And he lives in Dallas, Texas. So, but I will remain with the Parole Project as long as I'm needed to be there.
Okay. Mr. Knox, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of comments, really. I would say that Dorothy White gave you some really good advice.
Yes, she did that.
I
never forgot it. I never forgot it.
Next time I see her, I'm gonna tell her you said so. So how long have you been at the water treatment plant?
I went to the water plant and it was, say around about, it's hard to remember because
He was 19.
2019.
2019.
Okay, so you've been there quite a while. I know how important that particular job is to the whole penitentiary in the community. I want you to tell us about the toolbox that Sloan was talking about. Tell us about that.
Those are the programs that I received up here as I finally had an opportunity to get involved with. And Madam Board Member, I'm telling you, that was from God. It was. And I took to it. I mean, it's like this was made for me. These were all of the unanswered questions that I needed answered. They answered them for me. And I was there. I went above and beyond because, like I said, this was what had been missing all that time. Just filling all the blanks and everything. Because when you going through some of the things that I went through, I was looking for answers and I couldn't find them anywhere. But they didn't have these type of resources during that time.
I know. Well, I would think that they came about for you when you were ripe and ready to get the message. Would you agree?
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it. I'm forever indebted to them for it.
Well, I'm glad to hear your enthusiasm about it. I really am. You started taking those programs without any hope of ever being released.
Well, I didn't know what was going to be the outcome. I knew that I need them in my life because you live around people all the time. And with these programs, you'll become a better person, not just for yourself, but for everyone else that's around you. Right. And guys back there where I'm at Camp F, I mean, they like it's a community and you want to be able to get along with everybody. And these are people that's here for the same type of things that I was here for. So sometimes it's better to be a good listener than to be a good talker. And
all right, take down the advice right now.
I always made myself available too. Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. George, I've enjoyed listening to you, talking to you, hearing about you. I was so impressed with your son, George Phillips, and what he had to say. I was really moved by his remarks. And I'd like to wish him early a happy birthday for tomorrow. I don't have any more questions. Mr. Till, do you have any questions?
No.
That toolbox includes 445 days of programming.
Yes, ma'am.
That's impressive. You have a good disciplinary record. You have excellent plans. I would, there is a requirement that you have an educational component. I am going to waive that with the board's permission because you've had a brain injury that will not allow you to avail yourself to that kind of programming now, since you've had the brain injury. And so, because you've had other programming and you have employment skills, my vote is to grant parole to the Parole Project. Mr. Myers and Sloan, I think for at least a year. And I would strongly encourage an ICOPS with your son, who is an exemplary person who can provide lots of positive reinforcement. Mr. Tillis?
Mr. Moore, what's your son's name?
George.
I want to wish him happy birthday. My vote is to.
Thank you.
And George, my vote today also is to grant you to the Parole Project. I also recommend a long-term transition plan from there, and that you do make arrangements to relocate from Madison Parish. I don't think that's appropriate for you to go back to that community. So I wish you well. You speak very well. I'd like to also add that you do some community service work, speaking to at-risk kids. I think that
yes,
you can.
ma'am. I would love that.
You can make a good impression on some folks and maybe help change their life. I'll leave it up to your parole officer how often you should do that. Good luck to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, bud.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Joe. You did a very good interview.
Okay, and they granted, and I feel good about it. The guy's got a great attitude, you know, he really does. And I think he is more lucky than he realizes that they did not ask him about the crime. And I'll tell you why. He was the last one on this docket. Maybe they were just tired. It was a long day. But earlier in the docket, they had a very similar situation. They had someone who was commuted all the way back in 2020. 5 years ago, and he was commuted even with a story that just really seemed totally nuts, totally bogus. Maybe you've seen the hearing already, maybe you haven't, but there's enough hearings where I don't think I'm doing any giveaways. What's it called? The word I'm looking for, where you tell what's going to happen. Spoilers. So, but if you're nervous, then stop listening. But anyways, the person gets commuted and he shows up and he says the exact same story that he got with the commutation. And he gets 2 grants from the same board, right? But Miss Ledoux said, she sits there and she ponders and she thinks and she says, I just can't get over the behavior, the deceitful character that you're showing us. It's a general behavior of deceitfulness. I don't like it. You're not being honest, and I'm going to deny. And this guy had been in prison for like 40 something years. He waited 5 years after the governor signs the commutation. He gave the same story to the board, by the way, that even Mr. O'Shea said, I believe your story. But there was a twist as to why Miss Ledoux didn't believe it. And you know, I'll stop there. But it's a fascinating hearing. But anyways, the point is that Miss Ledoux denied just a few hours earlier for someone because she thought they were being deceitful. And I wonder if they would have asked him what happened and if he would have made the same comment, if she would have done the same thing. And he's lucky that they didn't go in there because it's just his story was really, really, really not cool. But outside of that, he's a likable guy. I mean, if I could have that kind of energy, that kind of positivity, I think I'd be a happy person. And he couldn't help but love his son and that relationship that they seem to have together. And I do hope that he talks to the youth. He seemed genuinely like enthusiastic about doing it. You know, they say it so often to so many people. You should talk to the youth. And I just look at him like, no one's going to listen to this person talk in a room. He doesn't have talking ability. There's no enough. This guy, he's fun to be around, you know? Oh, man, I hope he does well. I hope we don't see him again. I hope we don't. I don't think we will. And with that, I'll let you go.
She was older than me. She was about, look at me, but she was in her late 50s or early 60s, something like that.
So you, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old man in a fight with a woman in her 60s?
Yeah, she was a big woman.
All right. Well, after you hit her in the head with the hammer, why didn't you just leave?